I like it.
Hey, Terry. It's not quite musical,
It's
but
all right. It's apropos for this.
I want to talk about making stuff
Let
from non-makers.
let's do it.
I have a question for you about how you approach your musical equipment. Not I don't want to have a gear show. Like I don't want to have a let's compare notes about which guitars we own and what our dream guitars are. I think that'll probably bore us both. But how much do you do? Like, do you consider yourself a drummer, a guitarist, a multi instrumentalist, a vocalist, or right? Like, what's your main stuff?
I'm a writer.
Okay, let me expand on this. What's your main instrument? Do you have a main instrument?
Most of what I write on is guitar.
And that's been for how long?
College.
Okay, and before that, you were a drummer.
I learned to play instrument. The first instrument I learned to play was drums, and I used learn to play loosely.
I feel like every drummer is a tech. And I use tech in the sense of a music tech, meaning you have to maintain, adjust, set up, and uh, sometimes like you have to take care of the equipment. And if you're a drummer, you have drum head tension. You have a lot of hardware, little moving parts, chains connected to pedals, connected to hinges. Everything can squeak. I mean, and that's not good. Everything can crash into each other. It has to go in a particular place, and it's also very personal preference based. So, do I want to have a high throne? They call a chair a throne when you're talking about drums. I don't know if you knew that.
I did.
So, I feel like every drummer is a tech. True or false?
Absolutely. I think it's a battle between lead guitarists and drummers on who is more gear centric.
I thought, because I learned pretty early that the things that you need, like I learned how to tune a guitar and change strings on a guitar pretty quickly because it was easier than learning to play the guitar by a lot. So well before I had any guitar playing skill, I had already changed strings. Um, and that led me to think that most guitarists were generally in favor of maintaining their gear. That became, way more of a thing once I started playing more electric guitar, where, knowing what the knobs do is half of an electrical engineering degree if you really get into it, maybe more than that. And then as I played with more and more people, I realized that was not necessarily the case. I mean, I knew some handy people who were capable of fixing things, maintaining things. They had a set of tools, and they'd take their guitar to a shop to get the strings changed, which to me was trivial.
I don't understand that. I mean, I understand like truss adjustments and, I understand setting up a guitar, having someone do it. I have my guitar player does that kind of stuff. So I have him go through all my guitars on occasion, but I can change strings. I prefer not to change strings. I prefer letting the instrument go with the strings on it until they either produce an odor that is noxious enough for me to want to get rid of them, or until they like are brittle and just not functioning. I think worn strings sound way better to me. I don't like the brightness of new strings.
You like overdrive, right? Tube breakup,
For sure. Yeah.
but like not all the way into fuzz, but just tube breakup.
That's what I like most about vintage amps. That's hard. We both share an affinity for that Kemper profiler.
Profiler.
Yeah. And what I like most, that's a phenomenal piece of equipment that I will own at some point. But what I like most about vintage tube amps and those circuits is the right circuit, the right amp turned up is beautiful. Like it's hard to get them. It's hard to get them at low volume to break up appropriately, but at the right volume, those old, especially the circuits that the Thunderbolts and the you know, the and I forget who did all those circuits, but I think Silvertone was on the same circuit as
Mm-hmm.
well. A lot of department store model amps were on that circuit. Um, and I think those circuits at high volume sound, it's hard to match it.
So let's explain drive and breakup and distortion quickly here for anybody who doesn't know what it is, or for the sake of making sure that we know what it is correctly. So uh, distortion in a guitar goes from dee to dur. It's the dur. That's the distortion. And there's
Yeah.
generally three effects that are commonly referred to as drive bass. You have overdrive, which is a little bit of dur. Then you have distortion, which is more dur. And then you have fuzz, which is even
Fuzz.
more dur.
Yeah. And
And so it's
anybody who knows the band Smashing Pumpkins circa 1995, a lot of fuzz on those. In
a lot of
fact, I think
fuzz.
that's a Big Muff, if I recall correctly, which
Dinosaur
is
Jr., also famous for their fuzz sound.
yeah.
So all of this, your department store amp was not made to make that. So the era you're talking about is like 1950 to 1985-ish, right? Maybe earlier.
Probably skewing a little later, like late 50s, and
Okay.
then a little earlier on the backside. So late 70s, maybe.
And so these amps were designed not to sound crunchy, crispy, and broken up. They were designed to be affordable for someone to play a guitar on in the electric guitar craze. So how they got misused was basically if you overload the circuitry, specifically the tubes in the vacuum tubes that are part of the circuit, the sound is basically pushed farther than the circuit can handle, and it starts to break up. And this is the advent of Jimi Hendrix distortion and squealing guitar and all this stuff, and it became a very desirable trait. And for the last 50 plus years, everybody who wants to play rock guitar needs a tube amp. They need it cranked up, and they need too much signal going into that amp in order to make that crispy, crunchy, distorted rock and roll sound. And that's distortion. Or drive, distortion, and fuzz. Did I get it right?
You do. Yeah. And there are other things you can do to manipulate that signal, like delay or, phase shift, or you can modulate the signal. There are a number of things that you can do. And if someone likes bands like Radiohead, there's a good chance that they are using effects pedals, that's what they're called, to manipulate that signal to sound strange, to sound different. And that also happens a lot these days.
How much? So all of those are a different family of effects because they're time-based effects, as opposed to breakup based effects. Do you use a lot of the other stuff too, or are you mostly a overdrive guy?
Big delay fan.
I also like delay.
Yeah, big delay fan. Like not a real long delay. A tight delay, I think, helps a lot of. It adds a nice tonal effect. Distorted, clean, whatever. I like delay. I'm not. There are other effects pedals like chorus pedals and wah-wahs and things like that. That I'm, whatever. To each his own. I know the guitarists that I've played with have pedal boards that are the size of a Buick from the 50s. They're huge, and there are a million pedals on there. But that's not my personal style. But I'm also not trying to add sonic layers to a song. I'm just trying to add like a bass layer.
All right, so you don't generally work on your instruments beyond the basic string changes and that kind of thing, the
No.
simple stuff.
No.
Do you feel any compulsion to or desire to, or do you feel like you're good?
Oh yeah, I'm always. You name the situation, I always want to have the ability to mechanically do whatever that thing can do always, and I can't. And
Is it because of is it because you're not hardwired to be mechanically minded?
no, I am. It's just that there are, you and I've had this discussion a lot on here. Um, there are only so many hours in a day, and there are so many other things that I want to devote time to.
If you spend time learning how to, I'll just adjust the truss rod, which if you have the neck of the guitar is like this, and you need to adjust it to bend up more or bend less more, that's adjusting the truss rod on most guitars. But if you learn how to do all of the pieces of a guitar setup, so adjust the action to where you want it, so how high the strings are off the neck, adjust the truss rod, so how much the neck is bent or curved, learn to do your own fretwork where you're cleaning up, sharp fret edges or polishing frets that are worn, cutting your own nut, greasing your own tuners. I mean, the time that it will spend you, that it will take you to buy the tools for this, apply the tools, it could have been spent writing a song. And I just can't picture you wanting to fiddle with whether the guitar is playing flawlessly when you could have been writing a song.
100%.
Shoot,
100%.
even if it's not writing a song, you could have been recording a song. Like the song will not end up written and put to music and practiced with a band and recorded, to an album if you're too busy fiddling with your guitar.
Yeah. It's not, it's not it's an interest that I have intellectually. Like, I would like to be able to do that. I would like to be able to take things apart and, get a replacement part from eBay, have that part come in and have this thing that I've torn down put back together and work flawlessly. But the list of things that I do that need to replace that is a mile long. So
do you have any components sitting within arm's reach right now? Components, weird adapters, tools?
No, but I do have this old analog delay.
Nice.
It's a ditto looper, which if anyone knows anything about
It's a
loopers,
great looper.
yeah, they're pretty common.
I have a looper right here. My looper is within reach. This is my most popular rhetorical looper, right? Because this is a talk piece. I don't play it a ton, but it's from this company Chase Bliss.
Okay.
And all of their pedals for a long time took exactly this form: 6 knobs, 2 or maybe 3 foot switches, always in the same shape, so you could always know what you were getting on your board. They've got a bunch of these wild adjustment switches on the back, and they're very, very expensive. I got this used from a friend for a friends and family deal. Hand numbered on the back. Nobody take my number and do something with that. But yeah, so that pedal is overwhelming to me. The first way I got introduced to understanding what a guitar pedal did was a tremolo pedal, which is just changing the volume. So that I could grab my head around, right? It was easy to get in within reach of what's a tremolo do, because I already had a volume knob on my guitar. I have a guitar. It has a volume knob, and tremolo is spinning the knob like this. And that's it. So imagining a pedal that does that automatically for me was a very easy paradigm to wrap my head around. I don't know how I learned how to do stuff like set up a guitar. It just kind of showed up over time.
Well, I also like you, before we taped, you were rebuilding a home entertainment subwoofer. That's a thing that my father would do. That's a right tail trait. There aren't many people, gender aside, there aren't many people that either care or have that ability or some combination of the two things. So that's something you should one small thing you should hang your hat on. That's a neat trait to have.
What? So this is why I bring up that I don't know how I got here. I feel very comfortable working on a guitar, which has been, 10 years plus another 10 years as a kid in the making. it helped to understand that a guitar is not a terribly complicated thing, particularly if you're talking about a Telecaster, the first, or a Telecaster style, which is the first electric guitar ever made. It's a stick with some strings on it and some electronics, like a moving magnet pickup. And you could build one. This isn't like you could build one from bits and pieces and then screw it together. You could, other than maybe the guitar strings, you could literally build a Telecaster with every part doing it yourself. You could forge the metal to make the metal parts. You could wind the coils with copper wire to make the coils. It is so unbelievably simple. And this is still like, they're still in production. Like tons of these things are in production. So having a super simple thing and also playing a cheap knockoff version of it, so I didn't feel like I was going to break anything, that helped. But then, like the subwoofer thing, it's not so much about the skill to do the task. It's about knowing what stuff is going to be doable in a reasonable amount of time. So, it took me 2 hours to find the components for this thing. All I'm building is, it's a speaker inside a little box, and it has electronics that come shipped in a particular, like it's already packaged, the electronics. And all I need to do is connect 2 wires from the electronics to the speaker inside the subwoofer box, right? But knowing that that's all the subwoofer is was the hard part. Not finding the stuff or ordering the stuff or making the connections. Like knowing, oh, I can just plug these wires into the speaker and it will just be an amplifier connected to a speaker. That part was hard. Knowing, oh, hey, if I start to pull on this enclosure, this random plastic piece is probably going to pop off. And if I break it, either A, don't break it because it's irreplaceable and you will ruin the entire project, or, oh, if I break it, here are the options for how I would fix it. And and then some of it's like, do I have parts lying around? So there's a little, I took the old electronics out and I have a hole in the enclosure that I want to cover up. Do I have a chunk of acrylic sitting around? Is acrylic even the right thing to cover the hole? Is cardboard sufficient? Do I have a panel of wood? Like, it all just builds and builds and builds and builds. And it gets to the point where I know for this particular project, given that I could find parts and build this thing on paper, if you will, I knew that it would take me less than an afternoon to wire the stuff up. And then I'd have a subwoofer that fits under my couch, which I couldn't find commercially. And that's all I wanted. I just wanted to fit under the couch, right? Like that's the purpose of the project. And while I do somewhat enjoy the project for its own sake, I'm doing it because I want a subwoofer that fits under the couch. And I think that's, so I'm hesitant to take the kudos for, being a tinkerer, because I just want the thing that does the thing, right? If there was another way, if I could have spent $300 and gotten a subwoofer that fit under the couch, I'd have bought it in a heartbeat. But I looked and looked and looked and looked and looked and could not find this thing anywhere.
So do you think that is with the assumption that we both understand this is a hard to quantify question? Do you think that is more or less a prevalent trait in our society today than 75 years ago, 50 years ago?
All right. So we have previously disagreed on similar questions, but not the same question. So the way it's come up before was, are people more capable of being self-sufficient now than they were 75 years ago? And I don't think we ever got that close on that. We kind of disagree. I'm like, no, people are exactly the same now, or maybe better. Your take was more like, no, people don't know how to do stuff now. We sit in cars that were from place to place, sit in front of a computer. We're all a bunch of dumb idiots when it comes to using our hands. As an example, if by changing this question to, are more people building things because there's no other way to get it, or repairing things because that's the best course of action, things like, absolutely, stuff is less repairable now and fewer people are building their own stuff. But I don't think it has anything to do with the people. I think it's just circumstances, meaning the average number of people who know how anything is fabricated, assembled, maintained, in terms of physical goods nominally higher now than 75 years ago, meaning there's a total number of people who know this that is higher than 75 years ago. But percentage of the population that knows this is not high at all.
Where did no, it's not. And it's less, I would say. Where did that brain power go? What filled that void? Because my father's generation, and I've made this point with technology and executives, but my father's generation, out of necessity, had to know how to fix all the mechanical systems at their place.
Right.
And the roof, so structural, mechanical, even electrical and plumbing, all of those things, all of those systems, they had to know or be able to quickly figure out how to fix or repair or replace those things to keep their home running. What filled that void?
Well, first of all, being a jack of all trades is inherently inefficient. So
For sure.
if all you're trying to do is say, and I don't want to emphasize the stuff, but if it's the collected, time that you have done, it's things that you have amassed, it is experiences that you've been able to have, it's bands that you've been able to start, it's songs you've been able to play. There's a hard limit on anybody's lifetime. And having baked in efficiency because I have to go patch my own roof because there's no other choice, that is less efficient than me, I don't know, getting paid for podcast writing services if that's the thing that I'm amazingly good at. So it is more efficient for me to work as a podcast writer and pay somebody to fix my roof. However, that times everything in your life 100 years down the road, yeah, you have a less diversified skill set than before. And then layer on top of that what the options are for, a technological skill set. So there's way more people that know how to make a high quality photograph or a high quality video than 50 years ago or 25 years ago or 10 years ago. Right. So that's it's orders of magnitude more people know how to do that now. And that's to me, that's exactly what's slotted in for, I know how to fix my own roof, I know how to repair a subwoofer, et cetera, et cetera.
So we've just switched the technologies. We've changed the technological landscape. It's not that folks don't know how to do anything technically for themselves. It's just the canvas is different.
Yeah, exactly. And so I have a imaginary fast forwarded example of this. A friend of mine used to imagine this post-apocalyptic future from the movies or whatever. This is, Walking Dead style or something like that. And he was like, I'll have my guns. And I think at one point in my life, society is going to break down and my ability to work the land and shoot a gun is going to be my saving grace. And ignoring the likelihood of a catastrophic event like that, because that's not really the point. I'm not sure that the breakdown of society as we know it means that there's no longer specialization and gains from trade. So if I know how to give haircuts when society breaks down and some people want haircuts, that's still a valuable skill, even if society is broken down, because not everybody wants to go around, looking scraggly just because society has failed. But if there's no food and nobody gives a crap about a haircut because we have literally no capacity for anything except, do I have food right now? Then the ability to find food or grow food or trade for food will be much bigger than the ability to cut hair. But that's more like just how society works. I don't see one specific skill becoming more important in this hypothetical post-apocalyptic imagined wasteland of the future.
Do you ever think about the fragility of modernity?
Yeah, all the time. But I also feel like because it's built on the backs of generations and generations and generations, we might have like a huge event that puts most people, backwards modernity wise. Like we're either frozen or we take 100-year step back. But 300 years from now, assuming humanity has survived, that will be a blip and nobody will even remember. because the overall state of progress will continue. It's not like everything we've ever done as a species is erased because we have, a big disease outbreak or a big volcanic eruption or an alien invasion or whatever.
Yeah, so that's what I would. That's the aspect of the. Do you think, um, what's filled the void for being able to maintain a home? Is I think that modernity, and the gadgets and the technology has switched focus. The canvas is different, but I think I often think about how fragile modernity is, and that the skills necessary to maintain humanity and maintain civilization are the same as they were 200 years ago, 500 years ago, will be 500 years from now, assuming we're not half robot at that time or full robot or whatever, transhuman.
What kind of skills do you think? What do you include in that set of skills?
The ability to use the resources at your disposal for survival.
Exactly.
And
Adaptability is the biggest skill.
I think we're distilling that or selecting that out of society. That's my personal opinion. I think the brain power is on self promotion. It's on pictures. How do I become famous? How do I be known? How do I promote? It's on sort of the material, not in the home sense, but in the sort of the cultural sense. It's on sort of the abstractions of culture, and not the more tangible sort of things that I think you have to always maintain the skill to. I can grow food, I can build a shelter, whatever the level of complexity, I can do the things necessary to keep my family alive. And that can come.
How far would things have to go from the current state of modernity to, if I personally cannot grow food, I will die?
So that's what I was just getting ready to say, is I don't think it's that. And who knows? Okay, so here's the other aspect of it. Who knows in a pressure test what we're capable of? I may not be able to today with the conveniences of a Whole Foods and Amazon and whatever. I may not be able today lay out the plan for growing my family's food survival today. But in the context of, okay, I need to figure out how we eat, or my family and I will no longer exist. Do we in that moment have the capacity to sort of figure out how to eat? And I think that's the question. But what I was going to say is there are other ways, there are means other than I have a plot of land that's growing vegetables and I have a stocked lake, or we hunt or whatever. I think you can stock up a bunch of food. You can be a prepper, basically. I think there are alternative means for just, I can survive for some increment of time. And if it goes beyond that, in that increment of time, I'll figure out what the next move is.
So you asked me about the fragility of modernity and but you specifically asked, do I think about it a lot? So I like science fiction. I like science fiction movies, science fiction video games. I, in my life, have enjoyed science fiction books, although I don't read science fiction books very often now. There's never a time that I'm not thinking about about the fragility of modernity, because the stories I'm consuming are just having the same conversation you and I are having right now. They're having that conversation an infinite number of times in an infinite number of different ways, and it's all exploring this combination of what is enough to exist, and then what is the nature of humanity as a species and society's ability to do what it takes to exist. And so, like, every single thing in science fiction falls back to that. You don't even have to be into like the subgenres of post-apocalyptic stuff or anything like that, but it all comes back to, what is a man? That's really the question. And it's the same philosophical questions that, like, the Viennese philosophers were sitting around smoking cigars at a cafe are thinking. It's just got like laser guns and spaceships and stuff stuck on it to make it more overtly amusing to and more appealing to my base instincts.
Well, this just doesn't continue linearly uninterrupted, whether it's our lifetime or another, when is to be debated. But that's the interesting thing for me with our historical frames of reference are so limited, because this has been not a linear evolution. Humanity has not evolved linearly. It's very much been fits and starts, and periods of, we're in one now where it's pretty linear in terms of growth and development, but this is very fragile, and it changes quickly. And I think that aspect for me, whether or not it's in my lifetime, is it's comforting. I find comfort in that. I
See,
don't.
I think that's really the crux of it. So if I look at let me generalize the stuff that you're describing as this is going to be. I don't mean this to be as dismissive as it sounds, but we're talking about like your Boy Scout skills, hunting,
Yeah.
fishing,
Yeah.
whittling, you know, wearing a kerchief, like these fundamental, life skills that come down to, Boy Scout skills, basically. I think that they're more of a source of comfort than an actual necessity. So a worldview that is, if only I could work with my hands better, so and so thing would be more secure in my life and my existence and my family and whatever else. Well, I mean, there's no limit, right? Because if you're a fantastic fisherman, but you're not good at hunting and there's no fish left, you're up a creek, or I guess you're up not a creek. If you're a great speaker and a great leader, but I don't know, like you only have one eye, so you have no depth perception, so you can't shoot a bow and arrow well or something like that. I don't know, like there's always limits and constraints to ability. So focusing on, if only I had this set of skills, then something else, that whole exercise of feeling like you don't have this skill or feeling like you want this, and I'm not specifically talking about you, because I don't think it really applies here, but that identity searching and that skill set and that imagination of what would I do in these situations, all of that it's like internal identity seeking and internal planning for what would happen in a less serious situation than a post-apocalyptic, nightmare. So the guy that's like worried about having his guns, he's not actually worried about the end of the world. He's worried about like smaller scale stuff that he hasn't thought about, and is he going to be able to draw his pistol and defend himself, right? Like that's the
Does
kind of
he
stuff
have
that
it?
he's actually stressed. Yeah, exactly. Does he have it?
Does he have
Do
it?
I still got it?
Yeah. And the gun is the I've got it.
And let me tell you right now that my entire worldview is based on basically believing that I don't got it and I'm an extra, and I'm far more likely to be some random dead guy than I am to be the protagonist in this story.
Yeah.
The odds are not in my favor here.
Well, depending on the situation, the odds are in none of our favors. There are things that could happen that doesn't matter how prepared or what bunker or, what you have.
Well, I mean, on some level, every story ends the same, right?
Yeah, that's why I say that this is not a linear evolution, that at some point, to what degree, none of us knows, but at some point there will be a test, a pressure test to what we view as our reality today, physically. And I find comfort in that, because I know it's happened historically. Now, I also find a bit unnerving the fact, and what we were just talking about. Okay, let's assume that it's just bad enough. It's worse than COVID. It's enough that it's like a real thing, and you can't leave. There.
It's Hurricane Katrina plus COVID, but everywhere.
Correct.
That's a real disaster right there.
What do I do? How do I perform?
Yeah,
What
exactly.
that I'm interested in that. and that's not comforting. But
Right,
I think
but the conclusion here that if only you could wire a home audio subwoofer and set your
correct,
guitar up, that you'd be gravy
correct, yeah, correct,
is some comfort.
correct. And I think that, all kidding aside, I think for me, a lot of that, whether it's manifest in rebuilding a subwoofer or I can go into the woods and take down a tree and start a fire and build a passable shelter, and I can get water out of the ground. All of
Oh
those
man,
are the
water.
same.
Yeah, that's a big one.
All of those things are the same. What, am I going to see the look on my children's face of, you don't have it, do you? And I think a lot of that type of stuff is what I think about. And anyway, there it is. It's both comforting and it's mortifying.
Do you know how to shoot a gun?
Oh yeah.
Are you an okay shot?
It depends. So it depends on the type of weapon. Like I own a handgun. I'm not ashamed to say it. I'm not a gun guy. I'm not like, I'm not one of those guys. But it depends on the type of weapon. Like the gun that I have is a 45, but it's a smaller package. It's a smaller package, and that caliber out of the package of handgun that I have makes it bouncy.
Yeah.
And I'm not great with that, but with shotguns and rifles and more sort of sport based shooting means I'm pretty decent.
See, I'm an okay shot if the situation I imagine is it's the end of the world. It's Katrina plus COVID plus 9/11, but everywhere. And we have to fight the Russians. And there's still enough organization that I've joined Trump's private army, and I'm handed a rifle, right? And my job is to shoot straight, right? Like I'll be good at shooting straight in that scenario. I'll need to be trained on how to clean the weapon, how to maintain the weapon, how to disassemble the weapon. Because I won't even have the baseline for how to do that generically, so I'll need to have all that like refreshed for me. But make bullet go there, hit thing, I'll be okay at that. Assuming my vision doesn't get worse.
Yeah,
but I don't think that's a very common skill. I went to a shot with people a couple times who should be a better shot, and they just don't know how to. And we were killing paper at the range. We were sport shooting for kicks, and people they own an armory effectively, and they are not effective with those guns.
But think about this, okay? And this is, again, we're big on this. It's not a value judgment. It's an objective assessment. Think of how many people, especially in really dense urban areas, outside of, obvious crime areas, but how many people have never seen a gun in their lifetime, let alone held one in their hand?
Yeah, see, that strikes me as a problem.
Well, for me, the problem is what happens to these people in Katrina, COVID, alien invasion, when that soup hits, what happens to those people?
I don't know how I ended up in a situation where like I'm basically apologist for any lack of skills, but then I still come down hard on more people should know how to shoot a gun. Like, of all the things I could have picked, that's a weird one for me to land on.
Well, I mean, I think it's like the equivalent, obviously different, but the equivalent of learning how to balance a checkbook or read a balance sheet or maintain a checking account. Things that are maybe not taught so well in high school or younger grades these days, or maybe they are, I don't know, but we're just not that great at it. I think more, sort of financial literacy. There are certain things that, even if a lot of that's been automated, there are certain things that still should be tools and skills that a person has, even if they're not something that you use or use in that form on a daily basis.
Did you ever go on that site, Art of Manliness?
I did.
So like, all you have to do is be aware that it exists. First of all, I want to strip away the manliness, because a lot of it is just stuff you should know.
Art of peopleness.
You should know how to do. I do think that it's an apt title, because I think people who want to be manly are more likely to go seeking out things like the art of manliness's skills. But all it is just Boy Scout stuff for the 21st century. I I feel like one of the reasons I'm not worried about these, hard skills and hand skills and tool skills and whatever else is because I have a perfectly acceptable baseline in all of them myself. Like I'm not particularly handy. I know how to use some tools. I have a set of hand tools. I have some power tools. If I had to frame a house tomorrow, I would not be able to do it. I would lack the tool skill. I would lack the stamina. I sit in a chair most of the day. Like these things would make it so that I could not frame a house tomorrow. If I had to go like be a trash guy tomorrow and haul a trash can to over my shoulder to dump it out for an entire shift, I would not be able to do it. But the number of things that I'm not able to do would fill an infinite ocean.
You
And yeah, go ahead.
you just closed the circle. You just closed the circle of this conversation. And it's exactly, don't have the answer, don't have the correct answer, but it's exactly my fascination with your being able, I wouldn't say fascination, but my appreciation for
You're at least mildly impressed.
I'm impressed. I am, because, in my mind, I'm like, okay, Russ's kids would not see the look on his kid's face of you don't have this, because Russ would MacGyver something out of nothing. And, but the point is that disconnect between the knowledge that more people had in the past of how to operate their systems of their home has been replaced technologically with how to take pictures and how to use apps. And I don't think that's a good thing. I don't think that's a good thing. I don't think that altogether we should be Amish or we should be, Quakers, and no modernity should be, we shouldn't I love technology. I think we should fully embrace it. But I think at the end of the day, we're still humans. We're still a species, a fragile species, given the right system. And I think the skills that we're talking about are skills that should be, at least if they're not mastered skills that a person has, they should have, as you just described, at least a cursory awareness of how to get to that. I have these hand tools. I know how to use them. I couldn't frame a house tomorrow, but I know how to use the hand tools. Well, that's a hell of a lot better than what's a drill or what's a power saw. How do I take wood and make something out of that?
I'll give you one thing that's changed a lot in, call it, the last century. I think that and this is totally pulled out of my out of thin air, but I get the impression that the collective agreement about what that baseline set of skills is,
for sure,
that used to be kind of tight. Like you need to be able, if you can't field dress a deer, what are you doing with your life? But that's probably not even a good example. It's more like if you can't spin a wrench, if you can't trap a squirrel, I don't know, that's probably also a terrible example. But I think that my impression is that the expected baseline set of skills was a smaller and more widely agreed upon skill set. Whereas now, if you poll 100 people, instead of saying, here are the top 100 skills and 99 people agree on the top 100 skills, you'd get like every single person would have a different set of skills that they said was the most important.
So here's the question for you. How many people at scale, how many people of 100 need to have these skills that we're talking about?
See, that's a good question.
To maintain humanity, at least from, not going extinct.
So, I just have a circular answer. As many as are right now, because we're still here. That's my whole answer.
Yeah, but you're assuming that the systems that we have in place transfer to Katrina, COVID, the nightmare stew that could really stress this system.
Do you know what I do to solve my existential crises? I watch movies like I Am Legend, or what's the other one I'm thinking of? A Blade Runner 2049, great movie, or Mad Max Fury Road. All of these are dystopian science fiction-y movies. And I make sure that I have at least 5.1 surround sound with a subwoofer just like really thumping under my couch. And then I let the artists and the musicians and the costume designers and the actors and
Tell you how it's going to go.
I let it all just wash over me. And this is why fiction matters, because otherwise I would go crazy in my own head.
Yeah. Yeah, I do have the ability to compartmentalize and live in today and not be consumed by those things, but I do think about them.
Well, don't be consumed. Go spin a
No.
wrench and learn a skill, and we'll talk more about skill building some more. I feel like we're not even close to done with skill building. It's just going to keep coming up over and over again.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
You don't feel bad about not knowing how to make a subwoofer, do you?
No, because I could do it.
You really shouldn't do it.
If I, okay, I do this on occasion with something. I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this thing.
Yeah.
Like this is going to happen.
Right.
YouTube, and there has never been an easier time to acquire said skills than today.
Right. Yeah.
And so I'm like, okay, hit me with all the YouTube clips. You know, who do I know that's done this?
Mm-hmm.
What are the tips and tricks? You know, give me the rundown. And then I go in with the assumption that there's a fair probability that I'm going to break something. How am I going to respond to that? And I go at it.
I just feel like the Boy Scouts would be so proud of me for knowing going into this project what it was going to take, budget, having a plan, ability to execute. Some things changed on the fly, but they weren't major. Having parts and tools on hand, a little bit of adaptability, but not a lot. I feel like it's going to go fine. I'm not done. I'm halfway done with this project, and I can tell you decisively before the end of the day, I'm going to have it working.
No, I know you will. You know what I'm the king of, though?
Half doing it? I don't know. That doesn't seem like you.
No, that's why I just don't do it. But I don't have to do it anymore. But like IKEA, buying a complex, and the one that strikes me is a very complex wall unit that I put together. I can follow directions. Like I simplify things into steps very easily. So if there's a template to follow or something for me to follow, I'll be able to do it.
Yeah.
But for me, I know what that involves from an effort standpoint, and I don't want to be doing that all the time. So it's who do I know that can do this way quicker and more efficiently than I can, and what is their phone number? And
you do believe in specialization after all. See you next time, Terry.
Have a good day.
Take care.